Once upon a time, in the charming coastal town of Cape Haven, lived a couple deeply in love. The scent of salt and sea permeated every street, every corner, every whispered promise the ocean carried on the misty mornings. Liam and Clara were the kind of couple that made people believe in true love again, despite the stark differences between them. Liam, a humble young man with calloused hands who made his living from the sea, had found in the arms of Clara, a young woman from a wealthy family, a feeling so overwhelming it made his heart pound every morning. They met on an ordinary summer day when fate decided to weave their lives together irrevocably. Clara had gone down to the Piers Fish Market to buy fresh ingredients for a dinner her parents were hosting for important clients. She wore a white linen dress that contrasted with the rustic tones of the market, and her blonde hair swayed gently in the sea breeze. Liam was unloading the last catch of the day when he saw her for the first time. She was trying to haggle with a vendor who was clearly overcharging her, and something about her determined yet gentle manner made him smile. "Sorry to interrupt," Liam said, approaching, "but that fish isn't worth half what he's asking. It's been sitting here since yesterday morning. See the gills? They're already losing their color." Clara looked at him, surprised by the intervention, and her green eyes met his brown ones. There was a spark there, something electric and undeniable. The vendor huffed in annoyance but immediately lowered the price. "Thank you," she said, and her smile was so bright that Liam forgot how to breathe for a moment. "You know your fish?" "I'm a fisherman," he replied, stuffing his hands in his pockets, suddenly conscious of the dirt under his nails, of the smell of the ocean that clung to his clothes. "I know every fish in this market and where it came from." "Then maybe you can help me pick the best ones?" she asked, tilting her head in a way that made his heart skip a beat. And that's how it began. Clara followed Liam through the market stalls, him passionately explaining each species, her laughing at his funny stories about storms at sea and the ones that got away. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, they were still talking, sitting on a stone seawall overlooking the ocean. "My parents are going to kill me for being so late," Clara said, but made no move to get up. "They're complicated. They have expectations about who I should spend my time with." Liam understood the unspoken message. "I'm not exactly the kind of guy wealthy parents approve of, am I?" "No," she admitted honestly, but then she took his hand, that calloused, strong hand, and laced her fingers through his. "But I don't care what they think. I care about what I feel, and I feel like I want to get to know you better, Liam." In the months that followed, they met in secret whenever they could. Rendezvous on a deserted beach at dawn before Liam went out to fish. Simple dinners in his small apartment where Clara learned to cook humble dishes she had never tasted in the mansion where she grew up. Late night walks along the boardwalk where they could just be two young people in love without the weight of social judgment. Liam taught her to distinguish the constellations, to feel a coming storm in the air, to mend fishing nets with patience and precision. Clara taught him to read poetry, to appreciate classical music he'd never heard, to see the beauty in things he had once considered ordinary. But their love had a price. The disapproval of Clara's parents cast a heavy shadow over their relationship. Her father, a rigid businessman named Richard Davenport, would often say with disdain, "My daughter deserves more than the smell of fish and a life of manual labor." Her mother, Beatrice, was more subtle in her cruelty, making cutting remarks about young women who get carried away by foolish romantic notions, and the importance of suitable matches. There was one particularly painful night when Clara finally confronted them during a family dinner. Liam had just dropped her off after a wonderful afternoon sailing, and she walked into the mansion with her hair still messy from the wind and a blissful smile on her face. Her father was waiting in the living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand and a stormy expression on his face. "You were seen with that." "Fisherman again," Richard said, spitting the word out like an insult. "Beatrice, talk to your daughter about the shame she's bringing upon this family." Clara clenched her fists, feeling anger boil in her veins. Shame. The only shame here is having parents who measure a person's worth by the money in their bank account. Liam is more of a man than any of the spoiled trust fund babies you try to set me up with. "Do not raise your voice to your father," Beatrice intervened, but there was a tremor in her voice. "We only want what's best for you, darling. That boy can't give you the life you deserve." "He gives me love," Clara shouted, tears starting to stream down her face. "He respects me, he listens to me, he makes me happy." When was the last time you actually cared about my happiness? Not the image I project, but how I truly feel. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. Richard finished his whiskey in one gulp. If you continue this ridiculous relationship, you can forget about our financial support. Let's see how romantic this love is when you're living in poverty. Clara, however, squeezed Liam's hand tighter each time she heard those words, her green eyes shining with determination. She started working as an English teacher at a local school, saving every penny. She moved into a simple apartment that she and Liam found together, a small but cozy place with a view of the sea. For the first time in her life, Clara did her own laundry, cooked her own meals, paid her own bills, and she was the happiest she had ever been. Meanwhile, in a distant city called Riverbend, where modern buildings contrasted with the green mountains in the background, lived Haley and Mark, a couple who seemed inseparable. Mark, a handsome and charming entrepreneur with an easy smile, had set his sights on Haley from the moment they met at the company where she worked as an administrative assistant. Haley remembered the day perfectly. She was organizing files in the records room when Mark appeared, claiming to be looking for an old report. He was everything she thought she wanted in a man. Confident, successful, with a way of talking that made anything seem possible. "Are you new here?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe with a smile that could melt hearts far more resilient than hers. "I've been here for 3 months," Haley replied, trying not to sound as nervous as she felt. She had always been shy, the kind of person who preferred to go unnoticed. 3 months and I'm only meeting you now? What a waste of time, Mark said, and the way his eyes scanned her face made Haley blush. "Let me make up for it. How about coffee after work?" Haley, like many young women, dreamed of building a family, of having that house with a white picket fence where children would run barefoot on the grass. Mark seemed to be the embodiment of those dreams. In the first few months, he was attentive and romantic. He took her to restaurants she could never afford on her own, bought her flowers for no reason, and sent sweet texts throughout the day. When he officially asked her to be his girlfriend during an elaborate picnic in the city park, Haley felt like her life was finally falling into place. But there were signs she chose to ignore. The way Mark got irritated when she couldn't go out because she needed to visit her sick mother. The passive-aggressive comments about her clothes or makeup. The way he always needed to be the center of attention at any social gathering. Haley justified it all to herself. He was stressed with work. He just wanted her to look her best. He was an extrovert and she was an introvert. It was natural to have differences. When Haley discovered she was pregnant, her world stopped. She was 24, had a modest job, and had only been in a relationship for 8 months. She rehearsed for days how she would tell Mark, imagining every possible reaction. What she didn't expect was the coldness in his eyes when she finally gathered the courage to tell him. "Are you sure?" was all he asked, staring at the pregnancy test she'd placed on the coffee table in his apartment. "I took 3 tests. All positive," Haley said, her voice small. "I know it's not ideal timing, but not ideal timing?" Mark interrupted, running his hands through his hair. "Haley, I'm just starting to expand my business. I can't have the complication of a baby right now." "Complication?" The word cut deeper than any knife. But Mark, sensing his mistake, quickly changed his tune. He pulled her into a hug, kissed her hair, and murmured apologies. "Sorry, babe. You just caught me off guard. Of course, we'll make this work. We're going to be parents." But something in the way he said it sounded hollow, like a line rehearsed for a play. Sarah was born on a rainy March morning, and when Haley held her for the first time, she felt a love so immense and terrifying she could barely breathe. Mark was there, taking pictures, smiling at the nurses, playing the part of the proud father. But in the following weeks, his presence began to dwindle. He'd come home late, claiming business meetings. He'd spend weekends working while Haley dealt with the nightly feedings, the diapers, and the endless crying of a baby who never seemed to sleep. "Mark, I need your help," Haley pleaded one night, exhausted, with Sarah crying in her arms. "I haven't slept properly in 3 days. Could you at least hold her for half an hour so I can take a shower?" "Work all day, Haley," he replied without looking up from his phone. "You're at home. Taking care of the baby is literally all you have to do." Tears burned her eyes, but she wouldn't let them fall. Not in front of him. She took Sarah to the bedroom, sang softly until the baby finally drifted off, and then allowed herself to cry in the shower, where no one could hear. What no one knew was that the destinies of these 2 stories were about to intertwine in unimaginable ways. In Cape Haven, Liam and Clara's life was taking an exciting turn. One September afternoon, with the setting sun painting the sky orange and purple, Clara held Liam's hands tightly and, with tears in her eyes, whispered, "We're having a baby." Liam felt the world stand still. His knees nearly buckled. He hugged her so tightly she laughed through happy sobs, and in that moment, with the sound of the waves crashing on the nearby shore, they swore they would protect the life growing inside her with everything they had. "I'm going to be a dad," Liam repeated, as if he needed to say it aloud to make it real. He knelt before her, placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "You're going to be the best father a child could ever have," Clara said, running her fingers through his dark hair. "You're already the best man I know." That night, Liam could barely sleep. He lay awake, watching Clara sleep beside him, a protective hand over her belly, making plan after plan. He would work double shifts, save every penny. Maybe he could start selling fish directly to restaurants, cutting out the middlemen and increasing his profits. They would need a crib, clothes, diapers, all those things that had seemed so distant and were now urgently necessary. The following months were filled with preparation and hope. Liam worked tirelessly, heading out to sea before dawn and returning with full nets, saving every dollar. He started waking up at 3 a.m. when the stars still glittered in the dark sky and the sea was a black, mysterious mass under the faint moonlight. The pre-dawn chill bit at his face, but he didn't care. Every fish he caught was a diaper purchased, a piece of clothing bought, a guarantee that his child would have everything they needed. Clara, despite the constant morning sickness of the first trimester, sewed tiny outfits, her face illuminated by a maternal glow that Liam loved to watch in the quiet evenings. She had found a fabric store with affordable prices and spent her free afternoons creating minuscule onesies, blankets with delicate hand-stitched embroidery, and hats that barely fit in the palm of her hand. "Look at this," she would say, showing each creation to Liam with pride shining in her eyes. "Isn't it perfect?" They turned the second bedroom of their apartment into a nursery. It was small, but Liam painted the walls a soft yellow that Clara chose, installed shelves he built himself, and assembled the second-hand crib they had found for a great price. Clara hung white curtains with embroidered gold stars and a mobile of felt seabirds she had sewn herself. Every item had a story, had love stitched into every detail. "It's going to be a boy," Liam said one night, lying in bed with Clara nestled against his chest. He had a hand on her belly, now visibly round, feeling the baby's gentle kicks. "How do you know?" Clara asked, laughing. "I just know. A boy who will love the sea as much as I do. I'll teach him to fish, to sail, to respect the ocean." Liam paused, his voice growing softer. "And I'll teach him to love and respect women, just like your mother taught me to love and respect you." Clara turned to kiss him, happy tears wetting both their faces. "And if it's a girl?" "Then I'll teach her all of that anyway," Liam replied without hesitation. "And I'll teach her to be as strong and brave as her mother. But happiness has a way of being fragile when you're not prepared to defend it." In Riverbend, Haley and Mark's trajectory was taking a completely different turn. Sarah had just turned 2 when Haley suddenly fell ill on a Tuesday morning. She was making coffee when a wave of dizziness made her grab the kitchen counter. The world spun around her, and she could feel her heart beating erratically, too fast then too slow. Sarah was on the kitchen floor playing with pots and pans, banging wooden spoons against the lids and laughing at the noise. Mark found her on the floor, pale and clammy. Haley, can you hear me?" Sarah started to cry, frightened by her father's tone and the sight of her mother on the ground. He rushed her to the hospital, Sarah crying in the back seat, confused about what was happening. In the emergency room, doctors spoke of exhaustion, severe anemia, and perhaps something deeper that would require investigation. "She's very weak," the doctor said, adjusting his glasses as he looked at test results on a clipboard. When was the last time she had a proper rest? A complete nutritious meal? Haley tried to remember and couldn't. The days blurred into a fog of caring for Sarah, cleaning the house and trying to keep everything running while Mark was always busy. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice faint. "It's been hard." "She's going to need complete bed rest," the doctor continued, now looking at Mark. "Proper nutrition, support, less stress. Her condition could worsen significantly if it's not taken seriously." Haley had to quit her job. The company was understanding at first, but eventually they had to hire a permanent replacement. Without her income, however modest, their financial situation tightened. The days turned into weeks of doctor's appointments, endless tests, and the suffocating feeling of being a burden. Haley spent her afternoons lying on the couch, Sarah playing beside her, drawing with crayons, or building towers with colorful blocks. "Mommy, why don't you play with me?" Sarah would ask in her high-pitched voice, and every time she asked, it was like a knife to Haley's heart. "Mommy's sick." "Sweetie," Haley would explain, pulling the little girl into a weak hug. "But I love you so much. You know I love you, right?" "I know, Mommy," Sarah would reply, snuggling against her, her small body warm and comforting. Mark, at first, was the perfect boyfriend. He drove her to appointments, held her hand in the waiting room, and paid the bills that insurance didn't cover. But something imperceptible began to change in his eyes. Something Haley noticed in the prolonged silences, the short answers, the way he checked his phone more frequently. She saw how he would sigh heavily when he came home to a messy kitchen, Sarah with food stains on her clothes, and Haley still in her pajamas in the middle of the afternoon. "Can you at least try to get dressed?" he said one afternoon, tossing his keys onto the entryway table with more force than necessary. "This is depressing, Haley." "I can barely stand up," she replied, feeling tears well up. "I'm trying my best." "Well, your best isn't very good, is it?" The words were out before he could stop them, and from the flash of regret on his face, Haley knew he realized he'd gone too far. But he didn't apologize. He just picked up his phone and left, claiming he had to work. It was then that Haley began to notice the signs she had been ignoring for months, perhaps years. The different perfume on his collar, the text messages he quickly deleted when she entered the room, the business dinners that stretched late into the night. She didn't have the energy to confront him, but the truth weighed on her chest like a stone. Back in Cape Haven, the baby was born on a full moon night, and it was the most beautiful sound Liam had ever heard. The labor was long and difficult. Liam held Clara's hand for 14 exhausting hours, whispering encouragement, wiping the sweat from her brow, being her anchor when she felt she couldn't go on. "I can't do it," Clara cried at one point, her voice broken with exhaustion and pain. "Liam, I can't do this." "Yes, you can," he said firmly, looking directly into her eyes. "You are the strongest woman I know. You can do this, and I am right here. I'm not leaving your side." And then, finally, the piercing cry of a newborn filled the room. A healthy boy with his father's dark eyes and his mother's smile. They named him Lucas, and for the first few months, that small family lived in a bubble of happiness. So intense that even Clara's parents softened their criticism upon seeing their grandson in their daughter's arms. Richard and Beatrice showed up at the hospital the day after the birth. Clara was breastfeeding Lucas when they entered the private room Liam had insisted on paying for, even if it meant going into debt. The silence was tense for the first few moments. "He's beautiful," Beatrice finally admitted, approaching cautiously. "May I hold him?" Clara looked at Liam, who gave a slight nod. She placed Lucas in his grandmother's arms, and for the first time in months, there was a soft expression on Beatrice's face. "He has Liam's eyes," she said, and there was no malice in her voice, only observation. Richard remained by the door, but his eyes couldn't look away from his grandson. "You're going to need help," he said gruffly. "Raising a child isn't cheap." "We'll manage," Liam replied, his voice steady despite feeling intimidated. "Lucas will never want for anything." There was a moment of tension, and then Richard nodded slowly. "I see you love my daughter, and that she loves you. I still think you're foolish kids, but maybe I judged too quickly." It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start. In the following months, Liam and Clara discovered that being parents was simultaneously the most wonderful and the most terrifying thing they had ever done. The sleepless nights, the constant worries, the crying that seemed endless, but also the first smiles, the way Lucas would grip Liam's finger with his tiny hand, the peace on his little face as he slept nestled against Clara's chest. "Look at him, honey," Liam would whisper on one of those nights, both of them leaning over the crib, watching Lucas sleep. "We did this. We made something so perfect." "He's our masterpiece," Clara agreed, lacing her fingers with his. But then the viral outbreak came. It started slowly, with scattered reports in the local news. A different kind of flu, they said, more aggressive. The hospitals began to fill, and panic crept silently through the streets of Cape Haven like a toxic fog. First, it was the elderly, then people with pre-existing conditions, and then inexplicably, it began to hit young, healthy people. Schools closed. Businesses reduced their hours. People started wearing masks in the streets, avoiding crowds. Liam felt a tightness in his chest every time Clara coughed. "It's just a cold," she would say, but the fever that wouldn't break told a different story. She tried to hide it, taking cold showers when he wasn't looking, forcing smiles when he came home. But Liam saw the sweat on her brow, the tremor in her hands, the paleness spreading across her usually rosy cheeks. "You need to see a doctor," he insisted one night, finding her bent over the bathroom sink, vomiting. "I'm fine," she lied, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "I probably caught something from Lucas. Babies catch everything, you know." But Lucas was sick too. The 8-month-old baby who used to be all smiles and energy was now listless, with glassy eyes and a high fever that no children's medicine could bring down. His cry was weak, frighteningly quiet, so different from the healthy wails they were used to. In a terrifying pre-dawn hour, with Lucas also feverish and moaning softly, Liam rushed them to the most renowned hospital in the region. The emergency room was absolutely packed. People in surgical masks crowded the waiting room chairs, some lying on the floor on makeshift pillows of jackets. The smell of disinfectant and fear permeated the crowded hallways. Clara could barely walk. Liam supported her with one arm while holding Lucas with the other. The baby was terrifyingly still in his arms, only whimpering softly now and then. "Please," Liam begged any doctor or nurse who passed by. "Please, help my family. My son is only 8 months old. He needs help now." But there were so many others, all desperate, all in urgent need of help. Triage was chaotic. Nurses rushed back and forth with clipboards, doctors shouted instructions, and monitor alarms beeped constantly, creating a terrifying symphony of emergencies. That's when Clara's parents appeared, someone from the hospital. Staff had called them, recognizing the Davenport surname on the admission forms. Her father, in his impeccable suit, even in that chaos, took control of the situation with the cold authority of someone accustomed to buying solutions. "My daughter and my grandson need private rooms immediately," Richard announced to the hospital administrator, who was quickly summoned. "We will pay whatever is necessary. The best doctors, the best treatments. Money is no object." And like magic, doors opened. Gurneys appeared. Dedicated nurses emerged to transport Clara and Lucas to private rooms in the hospital's VIP wing. Liam followed in a daze, grateful but simultaneously humiliated, his helplessness burning like acid. But then, Richard turned to Liam with a cutting glare, his blue eyes as cold as ice. "You see what your arrogance has led to? You can't even take care of your own family. A pathetic, incapable man who dragged my daughter into poverty. If she dies, Liam, her blood is on your hands." Liam swallowed the words he wanted to scream, because right then, all that mattered was saving Clara and Lucas. But each insult pierced his heart like sharp glass. He wanted to shout that he had worked until his bones ached, that he had saved every penny, that he loved that family more than his own life. But the words got stuck in his throat, choked by the guilt Richard was deliberately planting there. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, in a cruel twist of fate, Haley was also being admitted to the same hospital. The viral outbreak had found an easy target in her, a body already weakened by her previous illness. Her condition, which had started as a simple malaise, had evolved into something more serious with the virus. She was at home with Sarah when a high fever hit her like a train. A neighbor who came to check on her found Haley semi-conscious on the couch, Sarah crying beside her, trying to wake her mother up. Mark was called. He showed up at the hospital, bringing a frightened and confused Sarah. He held his daughter while the doctors explained the gravity of Haley's situation. "She needs to be admitted immediately," the doctor said. "Her condition is serious. She's severely dehydrated, her fever is very high, and with her pre-existing condition, this is extremely dangerous." Mark walked with her to the reception desk, but his phone wouldn't stop ringing. "It's work," he muttered nervously, glancing at the screen every 2 seconds. Sarah clung to his neck, asking for her mommy. "Is mommy going to be okay?" she asked in her tearful little voice. "Yes, sweetie," Mark answered automatically, but his eyes were already on the exit, already planning his escape. And then, on a gray afternoon, while Haley slept connected to machines that beeped monotonously, monitoring every beat of her weakened heart, Mark simply left. He dropped Sarah off with the same neighbor who had found Haley, claiming he'd be back in a few hours. He left a short note on the hospital nightstand. "I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. You'll be fine. Sarah is with Mrs. Gable. I'll send money." Haley woke up alone, read the note with trembling hands, and something inside her broke in a way no doctor could ever diagnose. The betrayal burned hotter than the fever. The loneliness hurt more than any physical symptom. She had a 2-year-old daughter who needed her, and the man who had sworn to love her had just discarded her like trash when she needed him most. "Where is the baby's father?" the nurse asked when she came to check her vitals. "There is no father," Haley replied, her voice empty. "There never was." The following days were a blur of pain and impossibility. Liam never left the hospital, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, alternating between Clara's room and Lucas's. The private rooms at least allowed him to stay, unlike the general ward where visitors were strictly limited. He held her hand, whispering promises. "You're going to be okay. We're going to go home. We'll watch Lucas grow up together. You'll see him take his first steps, say his first words. We'll be a family again." Clara would smile weakly when she could find the energy, but her eyes said what they both feared to say aloud. She was getting worse. The doctors came and went with increasingly grim expressions. Phrases like, "not responding," to treatment and doing everything we can hung in the air like birds of ill omen. One night, Clara gathered enough strength to speak. "Liam," she whispered, her voice so faint he had to lean in close. "I need you to promise me something." "Anything," he said, squeezing her hand gently as if she were made of porcelain and might break at any moment. "Lucas, you have to take care of him. No matter what happens to me, you promise you'll take care of our boy?" Tears streamed down her face, wetting the white hospital pillow. "Don't talk like that," Liam pleaded, his own voice breaking. "You're going to get better. You both are. We're going home together." "Promise me," Clara insisted, using the last of her strength. "Please, love, I need to hear you promise." "I promise," Liam whispered, kissing her hot forehead. "I promise I'll take care of him. I'll tell him every day how brave you were, how you taught me to love, how you were the most wonderful mother. He'll know you through my stories." Clara smiled one last time and closed her eyes. Liam stayed there all night, holding her hand, praying to a God he wasn't sure was listening. In the early hours of a Thursday morning, with rain lashing against the hospital windows, Clara squeezed Liam's hand one last time and whispered, "Take care of our boy. Promise?" And then her eyes closed, and none of Liam's cries could bring her back. The monitor beside the bed emitted a flat, continuous tone. Nurses and doctors rushed into the room, but Liam already knew. He could feel it in the way her hand suddenly went limp in his how all that warmth and life just vanished. "No, no, no," he repeated, sinking to his knees beside the bed, pressing his face against her hand. "Clara, come back. Please, come back. Lucas needs you. I need you. How am I going to do this alone?" But she didn't come back, and Liam stayed there, holding her hand until a nurse with red-rimmed eyes gently guided him out of the room. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. Is there anything we can do?" Liam shook his head. There was nothing that could be done. Half of his soul had just died in that room. He walked mechanically to the room where Lucas was, and when he entered and saw his son sleeping, connected to so many tubes and machines, something inside him shattered completely. 3 days later, little Lucas, who had fought far too bravely for one so young, followed his mother. Liam was sitting beside the tiny bed when it happened. Lucas opened his eyes, those dark eyes so much like his own, one last time. He seemed to look directly at his father, and then, as gently as a falling petal, he stopped breathing. Liam held his son's fragile body against his chest and simply couldn't cry anymore. There were no tears left. Only a vast emptiness that swallowed everything, a black hole where his heart should have been. He rocked Lucas for hours, softly humming the lullabies Clara used to sing, until the nurses had to, with infinite kindness, take the child from his arms. Clara's parents didn't even invite him to the funeral. Liam found out by chance when he went to their house to discuss the arrangements and found the door locked. Richard met him on the porch. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hard, though his eyes were red and swollen. I want to bury my wife and my son with dignity. Liam replied, his voice a monotone. They're my family. They were, Richard corrected cruelly. Were your family? Now they will rest with their real family, with people who could have taken care of them properly. You can't do this, Liam said, but there was no energy in his voice. He was so tired, so broken, that even fighting seemed impossible. I can, and I will, Richard replied. The funeral is tomorrow, at a private family cemetery. You are not welcome. You brought my daughter into poverty, and it killed her. I will not have you taint her burial with your presence. They treated him like a stranger, as if he had no right to his own grief. You don't belong here, Clara's mother said coldly when he tried to enter the family estate on the day of the funeral. You never did. My daughter made the mistake of falling in love with you, and she paid for it with her life and my grandson's. Liam stood outside the ornate iron gates, listening to the muffled sounds of the ceremony, unable to enter, unable to say goodbye. When everyone had left, he climbed the wall under the cover of night, found the fresh graves marked with temporary headstones, and finally, kneeling on the earth damp from a recent rain, he let his tears fall. I'm sorry, he whispered to the ground. I'm sorry I wasn't enough. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I tried. God, how I tried. Haley, for her part, survived. The doctors called it a miracle, but she felt no gratitude. Survive for what? To return to an empty house? To a life where the man she loved had abandoned her at her lowest point? The loneliness burned hotter than any fever. When she was finally discharged, 3 weeks after being admitted, she discovered that Mark had moved out, left town, left Sarah. He had simply disappeared. The neighbor, Mrs. Gable, had taken care of the little girl with all the love she could, but Sarah was different. She clung to Haley with a desperate intensity, cried if her mother was out of sight for even a second, and woke up screaming in the middle of the night. Is Daddy back? She would ask every morning, and each time Haley had to break her daughter's heart a little more by saying, No, sweetie, not today. When she was discharged, Haley made a decision. She would not go back to Riverbend. Not to that life. Not to the house she had shared with Mark, where every corner held memories of him, where every object was a reminder of broken promises. She took her meager savings, the little that Mark, at least, had the decency to leave in her account and move to Cape Haven, drawn perhaps by the promise of the sea, by the idea of starting over in a place where no one knew her story of abandonment and pain. She found a small, cheap apartment near the beach, with just one bedroom that she shared with Sarah, and began looking for work. Mornings were for dropping Sarah at a community daycare that accepted income-based payments, and afternoons were for job interviews that rarely went anywhere. You have a gap in your resume, interviewers would point out. Why were you out of work for so long? I was sick, Haley would answer simply, without elaborating. There was no need to tell strangers how her life had fallen apart. Liam needed to leave too. The familiar faces of Cape Haven only brought back memories that cut like blades. Every street corner held Clara's smile. Every sea breeze carried Lucas's laugh. Every time he saw a mother pushing a stroller or a young couple holding hands, it was like a stab to the chest. He sold the small fishing boat that had been his livelihood, took what little he had, and moved to Brighton Shores, a larger coastal city where he could lose himself in anonymity. The move took a single day. Liam didn't have much. Clothes, a few books Clara had loved, the crocheted blanket she had made for Lucas, a few photos he couldn't look at without shattering. He piled it all into his old pickup truck and drove for 6 hours to Brighton Shores, passing landscapes he barely registered. The apartment he rented was even smaller than the one in Cape Haven, a tiny studio on the 3rd floor of a rundown building with peeling wallpaper and a persistent smell of mildew. But it was cheap, and it was far from everything he knew, and that's all that mattered. 6 months passed in a fog. Liam now worked in construction, after a friend of a friend recommended him to a foreman who needed labor and didn't ask too many questions. The work was hard, physical, exhausting. Liam carried bags of cement, dug foundations, and hammered nails until his hands bled. He welcomed the physical pain. It was easier to bear than the emotional pain. He would return to the tiny apartment every night and simply exist. He didn't live, he just existed. He'd heat up a frozen dinner in the microwave, eat without tasting, and take hot showers, trying to wash away the construction dust and perhaps secretly hoping some of the pain too. He slept poorly, constantly waking from nightmares where Clara was calling for him and he couldn't reach her. where Lucas was crying and he was unable to comfort him. He stopped going to church, something he had done religiously before. "Why did you do this?" He would scream at the ceiling on particularly bad nights. "Why did you take them from me? What did I do to deserve this? They were innocent. Clara was good. Lucas was just a baby. Why didn't you take me?" But God, if he existed, didn't answer. Until one night, feeling suffocated by the tight walls, he decided to walk down to the boardwalk. The fresh ocean air, at least, still brought some comfort. He walked aimlessly, hands in his pockets, watching young couples stroll hand in hand, families dining in open-air restaurants, life continuing as if the world hadn't stopped for him. There was a small restaurant, with warm yellow lights flickering in the night breeze and the sound of soft music escaping through the open windows. Something about the place called to Liam. Maybe it was the smell of home-cooked food or the welcoming look of the curtains in the windows. Liam went inside without much thought, just wanting to be around people, even if he didn't speak to anyone. The waitress seated him at a table near the window. He ordered coffee and whatever special was on the menu, not really paying attention. And then he saw her. Haley was sitting alone at a corner table staring into a glass of wine she had barely touched. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, her brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. There was something in her posture, in the way her shoulders were slightly slumped, that Liam recognized instantly. It was the body language of grief. He knew it well. He saw the same thing every morning in the mirror. Their eyes met by accident when she looked up, perhaps sensing she was being watched. And for a moment, neither of them looked away. There was a recognition there, not of faces, but of scarred souls. Two strangers who, somehow, saw themselves in each other's shared pain. Liam couldn't explain it, but his feet carried him to her table before his brain could protest. It was crazy, approaching a stranger like this, but something about this woman pulled him in like gravity. "Sorry to bother you," he said, his voice hoarse from disuse, "but you also look like someone who's trying to forget something impossible to forget." Haley looked up at him, surprised by the raw honesty of his words. She should have sent him away, told him it was none of his business, gotten up and left. But there was something in his eyes, brown and deep and so utterly exhausted from living, that made her pause. And then, for the first time in months, she smiled. It was a small, sad, but genuine smile. "Sit down," she said. "I have a feeling you understand." And so it began. Two strangers in a seaside restaurant sharing pains they didn't have the courage to speak of with anyone else. Liam went first, the words pouring out of him like a dam had broken. He told her about Clara and Lucas, about a love that had burned so brightly he thought it would last forever, about the sickness that had taken them, about the grief that still woke him up in the middle of the night. Haley listened in silence, tears streaming down her face because she understood. God, how she understood. And then it was her turn. She told him about Mark, about being discarded like trash, about rebuilding a life from scratch in a new city with her daughter Sarah, a 6-year-old who still asked about her father. "You have a daughter?" Liam asked, and something in his chest, that void where his heart should be, tightened. Not with pain, but with something different. Something warm and strange he hadn't felt in so long. "Yes, Sarah. She's my reason for waking up every day, even when I don't want to." Haley paused, looking down at her hands. She asked why her daddy doesn't come to visit. What am I supposed to say? That he abandoned us when we needed him most? That we weren't important enough for him to stay? "You tell her the truth when she's ready," Liam answered softly. "And you love her enough to make up for his absence. Believe me, a child can feel when they're loved. Lucas felt it. Even in the few months we had together, I know he felt how loved he was." Haley felt tears burn her eyes again. There was something about this man, about the deep understanding born from his own pain, that made her feel less alone for the first time in a long time. They talked for hours, until the restaurant began to close around them. The waitress brought the check with an understanding smile, as if she knew she was interrupting something important. Liam paid for both meals, ignoring Haley's protests. "Please," he said, "you've given me something precious tonight. You reminded me that I'm still human, that I can still feel something other than pain. Let me do this." They exchanged phone numbers before parting ways, both with a strange feeling that this meeting meant something, that it wasn't just a coincidence. They became friends first. Casual meetups at the same seaside restaurant turned into walks on the beach on Sunday mornings. Liam met Sarah the third time they saw each other, when Haley, nervously, asked if he would mind if she brought her daughter along. "Of course I don't mind," Liam said. And when he saw Sarah for the first time, a little girl with dark curls and curious eyes who immediately bombarded him with questions, he felt something in his chest warm up. She charmed him instantly with her endless questions and infectious laughter. "Are you Mommy's friend?" she asked, tilting her head adorably. "Yes," Liam replied, but he already knew he wanted to be so much more. Sarah and Liam became inseparable quickly. He taught her how to build elaborate sandcastles, how to find beautiful seashells on the beach, how to identify different types of fish. Haley would watch Liam play with Sarah, see the tenderness in his eyes when he helped the little girl, the way his expression softened when she laughed, and her heart, which she had sworn was permanently broken, began to beat differently, faster, more hopefully. "Mommy likes Liam," Sarah declared one night with the brutal honesty of a child. They were having dinner at Haley's apartment, homemade lasagna she had made, simple but delicious. Liam nearly choked on his wine. "Sarah!" Haley exclaimed, blushing deeply. "What?" "It's true," Sarah said, shrugging. "You smile differently when he's here. A real smile, not that sad one you do when you think I'm not looking." Liam and Haley looked at each other across the table and something passed between them. A silent question. An equally silent answer. They didn't rush. They both had baggage, pain, scars that were still healing. But there was something there, growing softly like a seed planted in fertile soil. "I lost my loves," Liam confessed one night, months later as they walked along the beach under a starry sky. Sarah was at a sleepover with a friend from school, and it was just the two of them. The sound of the waves and the light of the stars. "I spent so long with a broken heart with no one that I even fought with God. I didn't understand why I lost a part of myself." He stopped, turned to Haley, and for the first time in a long time, his eyes shone with something other than sadness. There was hope there. There was life. But suddenly you arrived. You and Sarah, and you renewed something in me I thought had died with them. You made me feel a new peace, a passion I thought I'd never feel again. You made me see light in the darkness I thought would be eternal. Haley gently touched his face, feeling tears stream down her own. "I thought I'd never be able to trust, to love, to believe in someone again. But you showed me that starting over isn't about forgetting. It's about honoring the past by building something new. You taught me that it's possible to love again without betraying the memory of what was." They kissed right there, with the sound of the waves crashing on the sand and the salty taste of the sea mixed with their tears. It was a kiss of healing, of promise, of second chances they both thought they didn't deserve. It was gentle and tentative, two cautious hearts meeting, testing if it was safe to open up again. The following months were a careful construction. Liam and Haley didn't rush. Each day was another brick in the foundation of something solid. They had movie nights with Sarah, simple outings for ice cream in the town square, home-cooked dinners where they all cooked together. Sarah started calling Liam Uncle Liam at first, then just Liam. And finally, one ordinary afternoon while she was drawing at the table, she asked, "Mommy, can Liam be my new daddy?" Haley and Liam looked at each other, and in that moment, they both knew. They knew that this love hadn't come to replace what they had lost. It had come to show them that the human heart is capable of expanding, of holding new loves without erasing the old ones. Clara and Lucas would always have a place in Liam's heart, and that certainty, instead of being an obstacle, brought peace to Haley. She wasn't competing with ghosts. She was honoring the past while building the future. "I want to give you everything we've lost," Liam told Haley one night, holding her hands after putting Sarah to bed. They were sitting on the tiny couch in her apartment, so close they were breathing the same air. "I want to reclaim the dreams we thought were destroyed. I know it hurts so much to see everything fall apart, but together we have strength. We can rise from the ashes like a phoenix." "Our love didn't end when they left," Haley completed, resting her forehead against his. "Love never truly ends, it just transforms. Every tear, every pain we can overcome. Our bond is strong. Nothing will separate us because we choose every day to be together." And then Liam knelt, right there, in the simple living room of the apartment he now visited more often than his own. With Sarah watching wide-eyed from her bedroom doorway, she had woken up and peeked out, and they hadn't even noticed. He pulled a modest ring from his pocket. It wasn't a diamond, just a simple blue stone, but it had been chosen with care and love. "Haley, you taught me that the wind can blow, the storm can rage, but our love is a shelter. You taught me how to live again when I thought just existing was all I had left. Marry me. Let me be a father to Sarah. Let me build with you the family we all deserve, the one we all lost but can have again. Different, but just as precious. Haley didn't even have to think. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, 1,000 times yes. You are already my partner, my best friend, the love I didn't know I could still feel. Yes. Sarah came running out of her room, jumping and shouting, "We're getting married! We're getting married. I'm gonna have a daddy again." And they laughed, the three of them in a tight embrace, a family officially born right there in that moment of pure, unexpected joy. The wedding took place on a sunny spring afternoon, 6 months after the proposal. They wanted to do it right, to make sure Sarah felt secure and included in every step. The ceremony was in a small chapel overlooking the sea in Brighton Shores, with only their closest friends present, not many, because they had both isolated themselves so much, but those who were there loved them genuinely. Sarah was the flower girl, wearing a white dress with a blue ribbon that she had picked out herself, scattering rose petals with excessive enthusiasm, throwing whole handfuls at a time and making everyone laugh. The little girl was radiant, her smile brighter than any decoration. Haley wore a simple white lace dress, nothing extravagant, but when Liam saw her walking down the aisle, alone, because she had no one to give her away and didn't mind, his breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful, not in the way Clara had been beautiful. Every love has its own beauty, but beautiful in a way that made sense for him, now at this point in his life. The ceremony was simple but deeply emotional. The officiant spoke of second chances, of how love can be reborn from the ashes, of honoring the past while embracing the future. When it came time for the vows, Haley and Liam couldn't look away from each other. "I swear," Liam said, his voice thick with emotion, trying not to cry in front of everyone but failing gloriously, "to love you and Sarah with every piece of my heart. I swear to honor our story, both the one we share and the ones we came from before we met, and to build our future with respect, honesty, and infinite love. You are my beloved, my love." The answer my heart waited for through all those dark nights when I thought the light would never return. "I swear," Haley replied, holding his hands tightly, her own voice trembling but firm, "to walk beside you on bright days and through the storms that will surely come. I swear to build a home with you filled with love, laughter, and second chances. You taught me that starting over isn't giving up on the past. It's honoring it by being happy again, carrying memories like precious gifts as we create new ones." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and Liam kissed Haley to the emotional applause and cheers of their few guests, Sarah ran up to hug both of their legs, shouting, "Now we're a real family that nobody can break." And they were. A family born from the ashes of pain, forged in shared vulnerability, and strengthened by the promise that true love isn't the kind that never faces storms, but the kind that chooses to keep sailing together even when the sea is rough. The small reception was in the chapel garden, with fairy lights strung in the trees and a simple table of food that the guests themselves had helped prepare. There was a homemade cake baked by one of Haley's friends, music playing from an old radio, and more love in that humble celebration than in many extravagant weddings. Liam danced with Sarah first, spinning her in the air as she giggled, then with Haley, holding her close and whispering, "Thank you for giving me this. Thank you for giving us this." "Thank you," Haley whispered back, "for showing me I still could." That night, after the small party, Liam and Haley stood on the balcony of their simple beachfront hotel, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky. Sarah was asleep in the next room, exhausted from so much happiness, finally feeling safe and loved. "Do you think," Haley asked quietly, leaning against the railing and looking out at the dark ocean, "they would be happy for us? Clara and Lucas? Even Mark?" Liam thought for a long moment before answering. "I think true love wants happiness for those who are left behind. Clara made me promise to take care of our boy, and when I couldn't, I almost gave up on everything. But meeting you and Sarah gave me a new purpose. I'm sure that wherever she is, Clara is at peace, knowing that I found reasons to smile again. That I found a way to honor the promise I made, to care for a child, to love and protect even if it's not the son she gave me." Haley rested her head on his shoulder. "Mark doesn't deserve such a generous thought, but I choose to believe that everything happened as it was meant to." If he hadn't abandoned me, I never would have come to Cape Haven. If you hadn't lost your family, you never would have moved to Brighton Shores. Every pain, every tear led us here, and I wouldn't change where we are for anything in the world. The sound of the waves was like a lullaby, promising that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new joys. Liam and Haley's life was just truly beginning. There were plans to make. They were already talking about maybe moving to a bigger house, a place with a yard where Sarah could play. Dreams to realize. Liam wanted to get back to fishing, but this time with his own business, perhaps selling directly to restaurants. Haley was studying to go back to work, wanting to become a teacher like Clara had been, feeling it would be a way to honor her. There was a daughter to raise with love, Sarah, who blossomed more each day, her questions about her biological father fading as Liam simply became Dad with no qualifiers. And maybe, just maybe, one day, if it felt right, new children to expand the family that had been reborn from the ashes. "Do you want more kids?" Haley asked suddenly, turning to look at him. "I know that. I know it wouldn't be the same as Lucas. No one ever could be. But yes," Liam answered without hesitation. "Not to replace Lucas. He will live forever right here." He touched his chest, just like Clara. "But yes, I do. I want to see you pregnant, to take care of you, to do better than I was able to last time. I want Sarah to be a big sister. I want to build this family together." Haley smiled, kissing him softly. "Then that's what we'll do. In our own time, no rush. But knowing where we're going." But for now, on that starry night, they simply existed in the present. Two tired hearts that had found shelter in each other. Two wounded souls who chose to heal together. And one little girl who finally had the complete home she had always dreamed of. Love was there, not erasing the past, but illuminating the future. And in that seaside restaurant in Brighton Shores, months ago, when two strangers shared their deepest pains without fear of judgment, something rare and precious began. A second chance. A new story. A new beginning that proved that even after the darkest night, the dawn always comes for those who have the courage to wait for it, to believe that light still exists even when everything seems like absolute darkness. They stayed on the balcony late into the night, planning, dreaming, simply being together. And when they finally went to their room, they lay side by side, hands intertwined, knowing that no matter what tomorrow brought, they would face it together. A family born not of blood or fate, but of the daily choice to love, to stay, to build something beautiful upon the ruins of what was lost. And as they slept, wrapped in each other's arms, the sea continued its eternal song outside, promising that life goes on, that love persists, that there is always hope for those brave enough to seek it again. YouTube outro, narrator's voice over gentle, uplifting music. And there you have it, story lovers. What an overwhelming journey for Liam and Haley, a story that starts with two hearts in ruin who find each other and, together, climb back into the light. We saw a man devastated by grief and a woman wounded by abandonment find a safe harbor in one another. Their journey showed us that loving again isn't about forgetting the past, but honoring it by building a new future. This was a beautiful story of rebuilding, not rescuing, where little Sarah shone as the beacon of hope that guided this new family. Now it's your turn. What was the moment that hit you the hardest? The silent meeting in the restaurant where their pain recognized each other? Sarah's innocent request for a new dad? Or the wedding vows, binding past and future in a promise of love? Tell us in the comments below. If this story of resilience and second chances moved you, please share it. Let's spread the message that there is always a new dawn, even after the darkest nights. And of course, leave your suggestions for our next videos. A huge hug, and until next time, where we'll prove once again that true love isn't what stops us from falling, but what sits beside us in the ashes and helps us rise stronger than before.